It started with excitement. Emily practically danced around the kitchen when she told me she had signed up for salsa classes. With Claire, she added quickly, tossing her gym bag over her shoulder like it was something she'd done for years. It sounded harmless enough. I smiled, nodded, told her to have fun. It had been a while since she had found something she was passionate about outside of work and family life. I didn't see a reason to be suspicious. Not then. The first few weeks seemed normal. She would come home flushed and laughing, her cheeks pink from the exertion, her voice light as she described the steps they learned. She talked about how clumsy she felt, how Claire couldn't keep time to the beat, how the instructor, Mark, was very patient. She mentioned him the way you mention a waiter or a cashier, just background noise to the evening. But then, little things started to shift. Emily began staying later after class. At first, it was 15 minutes, then half an hour, sometimes longer. Extra practice, she would say, shrugging as she kicked off her shoes. Claire needed help with a tricky move. She would say it so easily, so offhandedly, that questioning it felt petty, insecure. One Thursday evening, I decided to take the dog out for a longer walk. I wasn't thinking about Emily or the class. The air was crisp, and the streetlights buzzed quietly overhead. As I rounded the block near the dance studio, I spotted Claire walking toward me, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, her pace casual. "Hey, Claire," I said, keeping my voice light. "How's it going?" She smiled, surprised but friendly. "Good. Just heading home from class." I nodded, glancing at my watch without thinking. 8:45 p.m. "Guess Emily's already on her way, too," I said, more to fill the silence than anything. Claire laughed. "Yeah, should be. She stayed a bit to talk with Mark about some routines, but she shouldn't be far behind." We said our goodbyes, and I turned toward home, the dog tugging at the leash, eager for his dinner. I expected to find Emily already inside, maybe starting a shower or pouring a glass of wine. But the house was dark when I got there. No car in the driveway. No sounds from the kitchen. I stood in the hallway for a few minutes, listening to the silence press against the walls. 20 minutes passed. Then an hour. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Traffic. A chatty instructor. Maybe Claire had it wrong. At nearly 10:30, headlights cut across the window, and I heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. Emily walked in a moment later, smiling too brightly, swinging her bag onto the counter. "Hey," she said, breathless. "Sorry I'm late. Mark stayed back to show us some new moves, and we lost track of time." "Us." I caught the word but said nothing. She kissed my cheek, her lips cool and dry, and headed upstairs to change. I stayed downstairs, petting the dog, staring at the quiet house around me, feeling the first true crack split open somewhere deep inside my chest. I didn't sleep much that night. I didn't plan to follow her. I don't think anyone really plans something like that. It creeps up on you, a slow rot under the floorboards. One night, you find yourself moving without much thought, driven by something quieter and meaner than anger. The idea had been with me ever since that walk with the dog. Claire's casual words stuck somewhere in the back of my mind, like a splinter you can't quite dig out. Emily's explanation didn't sit right. Neither did the way she kissed my cheek like a woman checking a chore off her list. A week later, when she left for class again, I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my jacket, and drove out after her. I didn't tail her like in the movies. I knew where she was going. The dance studio sat at the edge of downtown, squeezed between a nail salon and an empty cafe that closed at 6. No traffic at that hour. No reason for anyone to notice a car parked half a block away, engine off, lights dimmed. I checked my watch. 8:38 p.m. At 8:42, the door opened. A group of women spilled out first, jackets thrown over shoulders, laughter spilling into the cold night air. Claire was among them, animated and carefree. Emily walked beside her, close enough to touch. For a moment, I wanted to believe everything was fine, that I was the one going crazy, that whatever tension I felt was just a trick of the mind. They stood outside for a few minutes, chatting, the kind of lingering goodbye you do when you're reluctant to go back to the real world. Then Claire waved and turned left, disappearing down the sidewalk. Other women split off in different directions. Emily hesitated near the curb, fiddling with her phone. I waited. She didn't head toward the parking lot. She didn't start walking home. She turned. At first, it looked like she was just checking something, maybe looking for a lost earring or a forgotten scarf. But her movements were too deliberate, too practiced. She glanced once down the street, quick and sharp, like a rabbit checking for hawks. Then she circled the building, toward the narrow alley that ran behind it. I slouched down in my seat, heart hammering harder than it should have. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of the car, to call her name, to stop this before it got worse. I stayed still. I stayed silent. From the alley, another figure emerged. A man, tall, relaxed, leaning against the wall with the kind of casual arrogance that only came from thinking the world owed you nothing and gave you everything anyway. Even from a distance, I recognized him. Mark, the instructor. He wasn't wearing the professional smile he had in the few pictures Emily had shown me. Those group shots where he stood at the edge of the class, arms folded, grinning like a man in charge of the music. This smile was different. Slower. Lazier. She reached him in a few quick steps. No hesitation. No uncertainty. They didn't embrace, not exactly. It was more subtle than that. He touched her elbow lightly, possessively, drawing her a fraction closer. She tilted her head up, the way she did when she wanted to be kissed without asking for it. I couldn't hear them, could barely see anything more than outlines in the half-light. But you don't need sound for betrayal. It has a shape. It has a weight. I sat there, feeling the moment stretch out like wire between my ribs. Part of me wanted to believe it could still mean something else, a discussion, a thank you for extra help, a professional conversation. But I wasn't a fool. The human body tells the truth even when the mouth won't. The way she leaned into him, the way he smoothed a hand along her back, the way neither of them looked around like they were afraid of being seen. I stayed longer than I needed to. Long enough to see them slip back into the building together, the door closing behind them without a sound. I drove home in silence, hands locked on the steering wheel, headlights carving useless shapes in the dark. At a red light, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I wasn't sad, either. It was something colder. Harder. A quiet decision taking root inside me, spreading through my veins. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the decision was made. No confrontation. No shouting match. No late-night arguments that would end with someone sleeping on the couch. I needed proof. Not for her. For me. And if Mark thought he could bury his past here, in a small studio, in a town where no one knew his name, he was about to find out he wasn't nearly as clever as he thought. I didn't confront her after what I saw. Confrontation is for people who think they might still save something. I didn't. I needed facts, not more words she could twist or deflect. Proof, solid, undeniable, was the only way forward. The next day, while Emily was at work, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Finding a private investigator wasn't as glamorous as it sounds. No smoke-filled offices, no trench coats. Just a series of Google searches, online reviews, and a few cold calls that left me feeling like I was hiring a plumber to fix something leaking deep inside my life. I settled on a man named David Rourke, former law enforcement. Quiet reputation. No fancy website, just a simple promise. Discreet, efficient, thorough. We met the following evening in a small coffee shop a few towns over. He was in his late 40s, with a weathered face and the kind of stillness that made you instinctively trust him or fear him. Maybe both. He listened without interrupting as I laid it all out. The late nights, the classes, the strange behavior, the scene behind the studio. I kept it clinical, stripped of emotion. Facts only. When I finished, he nodded once and said, "I'll find out for you." 3 days later, he called me. His voice was as calm as ever, but the weight behind it was different. "I've got something you'll want to see." We met again in the same coffee shop. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photos. Emily and Mark together, not just in the studio but outside it. Parking lots. Side streets. A diner 2 towns over, tucked into a booth, her hand resting lightly on his wrist as they talked. It wasn't just the physical closeness. It was the intimacy of it. The ease. The small, unconscious gestures of 2 people who had crossed a line a long time ago. David wasn't finished. "I ran him too," he said, tapping the folder. "Your instructor, Mark Blevins, 32 years old, originally from a small city in another state. Moved here just under a year ago." "That's not the interesting part," David said. He pulled out a printed thread from a local forum, posts dating back 18 months. Heated discussions, accusations, stories from angry husbands and betrayed girlfriends. Mark had a history. Allegations of inappropriate relationships with students. Not criminal, nothing that stuck, but enough smoke to suggest a serious fire. A handful of men even admitted trying to confront him after finding out about their wives or girlfriends. One post, in particular, caught my eye. A man saying he wished he'd gone through with pressing charges but was talked out of it to avoid public embarrassment. David leaned back in his chair. Looks like he left town before things got ugly. I read through the post slowly, the way you watch a slow-moving train wreck and can't look away. Different names, different faces, but the same pattern, the same arrogance. David had already done half the work I didn't even know needed doing. I can get you more, he offered. More pictures, more timelines, whatever you need. I shook my head. This is enough. Because it was. More evidence wouldn't change what I knew, wouldn't undo what I saw, wouldn't erase the bone-deep certainty that this wasn't just a mistake or a bad decision. It was who she had chosen to become when I wasn't looking. That night, lying awake next to her, listening to the soft, even rhythm of her breathing, I realized something important. I wasn't angry that she had betrayed me. I was angry that she thought I was too stupid to notice. That she thought whatever we had built, years of trust, routines, quiet mornings, shared dogs, and shared bills, could be so easily replaced with a sweaty, grinning fraud in dance shoes. She wasn't careful anymore. She thought she was untouchable. So I started thinking not about saving the marriage, or even about punishing her. I started thinking about the right stage, the right audience, and the right moment to show her exactly how wrong she was. And Mark? Mark was going to learn that sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it follows you, patient and cold, waiting for the right time to strike. I didn't rush it. Revenge, when done properly, is patient work. It's not screaming matches or broken plates. It's waiting, sharpening the knife so quietly that no one even notices the sound. Emily was the one who gave me the opportunity without even realizing it. One evening, while we were both sitting on the couch, her scrolling through her phone, me pretending to watch the muted TV, she mentioned it casually, like it was nothing. The studio's throwing a big party next month, she said, not looking up. Kind of a showcase. Students will do little performances, group dances, that sort of thing. Mark's really excited about it. Wants to show off the progress. She smiled, that empty, thoughtless smile she wore more often lately. You should come, she added, as if it were an afterthought. It'll be fun. I nodded slowly. Wouldn't miss it. She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly and went back to her scrolling. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed up at the kitchen table, planning. The venue would be the same studio where they met. But for the showcase, they were bringing in families, friends, even a few reporters from the local magazine. A lot of eyes. A lot of witnesses. Perfect. I spent the next 2 weeks putting everything together. Every spare moment at work, every quiet night, while Emily thought I was napping on the couch, I was gathering, sorting, preparing. The first thing I did was compile all the photos David had given me. Shots of Emily and Mark together outside of class. Shots that were far too intimate to pass off as professional. Then I added screenshots of the forum posts, the angry messages from other men, the accusations that had followed Mark across state lines. I highlighted the parts that mattered, the dates, the patterns, the warnings no one here had known to heed. Finally, I edited it all into a presentation. No dramatic music, no flashing red text, just quiet facts, laid out one after another with brutal simplicity. Photo, date, screenshot, comment, another photo, another date. The kind of thing you couldn't argue with even if you wanted to. I didn't just want to expose their affair. I wanted to expose the pattern, to show that Mark wasn't some tragic romantic caught up in a forbidden love. He was a predator, and Emily was just another in a long line of poor choices. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. Every morning, I drank coffee across from her, nodding at her stories about class, about how excited she was for the showcase, about how proud Mark was of his students. Every evening, I kissed her forehead, wished her luck, told her how great she would be. I think she liked the new attention. Thought I was finally waking up, finally appreciating her newfound glow. She started dressing sharper for class. Stayed out later, practicing routines. I let her think she was winning. Meanwhile, I spoke to the studio's event coordinator, a young woman named Sarah, who clearly adored Emily and Mark. I told her I wanted to surprise them with a special presentation after the students' final dance. A tribute, I said. a way to thank them both for their hard work and dedication. Sarah was thrilled. "Oh, they're going to love that," she gushed. I smiled and promised her it would be unforgettable. By the time the night of the showcase arrived, everything was in place. I had the video loaded onto a flash drive tucked into my jacket pocket. I had the speech rehearsed enough that I could deliver it without sounding rehearsed. Short, calm, unassailable. In the parking lot before the event, I sat in my car for a few minutes, breathing slowly, watching families stream into the building, men holding their wives' hands, children carrying flowers, grandparents struggling with folding chairs. So many happy faces, none of them knowing what was about to break open inside that bright little studio. Emily texted me as I was locking the car. "Can't wait for you to see what we've been working on." I stared at the screen for a second before sliding the phone back into my pocket. So eager, so certain, so blind. I wiped my palms against my jeans, smoothed my jacket, and walked inside, feeling strangely calm. The kind of calm that only comes when you already know exactly how the night is going to end. The studio looked almost cheerful that night. String lights draped from the ceiling, cheap but effective, throwing soft golden circles on the scuffed wooden floor. Families and friends packed the rows of folding chairs, chatting, sipping punch, balancing paper plates of cookies. Laughter floated everywhere, blending with the low hum of Latin music. Emily found me quickly. She looked radiant, flushed with excitement, wearing a fitted red dress that caught the light with every move. She kissed my cheek lightly, smelling of perfume she didn't wear around the house anymore. "You made it," she said, squeezing my hand. "You'll love it." I smiled and nodded, watching as she disappeared into the crowd to join the others. I found a seat near the back, close enough to see everything, far enough to stay unnoticed. The showcase started on time. Students spun and stepped across the floor, some laughing through their mistakes, others stiff with nerves. The audience clapped at everything, eager, supportive. It felt like the kind of night where nothing bad could happen. Emily danced in 2 routines, both times paired with Mark. Watching them was like watching a play where you already know the ending. Their chemistry wasn't an accident. It wasn't training. It was familiarity, practiced, and easy, slipping into each other's space like it belonged to them. After the final performance, the energy in the room swelled. People stood and clapped, calling out congratulations. Mark took the microphone, thanking everyone for coming, praising the students. His voice was confident, relaxed, like he owned the room. Emily stood near him, eyes shining, soaking up the admiration. Then Sarah, the event organizer, stepped forward. "We have a special tribute planned to celebrate our amazing instructors," she announced, beaming. "A surprise gift." She looked at me and gestured toward the projector set up against the far wall. I rose from my chair, feeling every eye in the room track my movement. I handed the flash drive to the technician. He nodded and clicked to start the video. The first few slides were harmless. Group photos of students, snapshots of the class in motion, laughing, posing awkwardly. People chuckled, relaxed. Then came a photo of Emily and Mark alone at a diner, her hand on his wrist, their heads too close. The laughter died. A ripple went through the crowd, uneasy. More photos followed. Emily slipping into Mark's car after class. Their private conversations on dimly lit sidewalks. Every image carefully chosen, undeniable. Then screenshots from forums appeared, detailing Mark's history. Anonymous posts from angry husbands, stories that sounded too familiar now. The room shifted. You could feel it, the realization settling in. I took the microphone. "Not all patterns are accidents," I said, voice calm, steady. "Some people make careers out of them." I didn't need to say more. Whispers grew. Men turning to their wives, asking questions. Parents glancing around, uncomfortable. Mark stood frozen. Emily stared at me, pale and trembling. I stepped away from the microphone without waiting for applause or reaction. I wasn't here for a scene. I was here to pull off the mask, quietly, finally. The night had only just started to collapse. At first, the room didn't know how to react. It hung there, that awful moment when truth steps into the light and nobody can pretend anymore. Sarah, standing by the projector, looked paralyzed, her hands frozen mid-clap. Parents shifted in their seats, whispering urgently. Some of the women were pulling out their phones, already checking, verifying, connecting the dots faster than the men around them. Emily stood near the front, her body stiff, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to say something but had forgotten how. Her hands gripped the hem of her dress, knuckles white. Mark moved first. He stepped forward, smiling too wide, too fake, as if a bigger grin could undo what everyone just saw. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice too loud, too rehearsed. "Photos taken out of context. People love to create drama. Don't let one angry husband ruin a wonderful night." He laughed, sharp and empty, expecting the crowd to join him. They didn't. Someone near the back muttered something. A father, probably. His wife shot him a warning look, but it was too late. The tension cracked. Another man stood up, pointing at the screen still frozen on a forum post about Mark's past. "You gonna tell us that's fake too?" he asked, his voice steady, dangerous. Murmurs spread through the room. The energy changed, no longer festive, no longer safe. Emily found her voice then, but it came out wrong. Too shrill, too defensive. "You had someone following me?" she shrieked across the room. "You were spying on me?" Every head turned toward her now. I didn't move from where I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look at her until I was sure she felt the weight of everyone watching. "I gathered evidence," I said, each word deliberate. "Because trust isn't given freely after it's broken. And because lies don't deserve privacy." The studio owner, an older woman who had probably thought tonight would be her proudest moment, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She muttered something to Sarah and started motioning for the sound system to be turned off. But it was too late. Mark tried to regain control. He threw his arm casually over Emily's shoulders, like they were some wronged couple standing against the world. His touch made her flinch. "You don't get it, man," Mark said to me, smirking. "People grow apart. It happens. People like you," I corrected quietly, "don't grow. You just move from wreck to wreck and hope nobody notices the smell." Laughter, bitter, sharp, broke out somewhere in the crowd. Not a lot. Just enough to chip away the last of Mark's false confidence. Emily pulled away from him then, subtly, but I saw it. She wasn't angry at me. Not really. She was realizing something worse. She hadn't been special. Not to him. Not even close. I stepped closer, pulling a folded envelope from my jacket pocket. "By the way," I said, my voice cutting through the low hum of voices, "consider this your invitation." I handed it to Emily. Inside, divorce papers. Court date already set. She unfolded them with trembling fingers, her eyes darting over the lines, panic rising. "You'll fight it," I said, still calm, still cold. "You'll drag it out if you want. But the house is mine. It's protected. Inherited before the marriage. All you'll get is half of a used car and maybe a broken dresser." Her face twisted, not into sorrow, but into pure rage. "You bastard," she hissed, voice low so only I could hear. "No," I corrected again. "Just smarter than you thought." Behind her, a few more men stood up. 3 of them now. Hard faces. Stiff shoulders. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at Mark. Recognition flickered in their expressions. Emily noticed. She turned, confusion slipping into fear as she saw the way they moved, not angry, not yelling, just walking slowly, steadily, like men closing in on something they had been hunting for a long time. Mark backed away, hands raised slightly, the smirk long gone. One of the men spoke. "There you are," he said, almost gently. "Been a long time, hasn't it?" The studio buzzed with confused voices, rising like static. Mothers pulling their daughters back a step. Fathers folding arms across their chests. Sarah stood motionless by the projector, looking as if she might be sick. Emily turned back to me, pleading now, her voice cracked open. Mark tried to talk his way out. Of course he did. Men like him always think words will save them when fists can't. But the 3 men who approached him weren't interested in talking. "You remember Kayla?" one of them said, stepping closer. "You remember Stacy?" said another. Mark's mouth moved, forming half sentences, half apologies, half lies. But the crowd had turned now. The room was no longer neutral. It was judgmental, suspicious. People shifted away from him like he was a disease someone finally named. I leaned against the far wall, arms folded, watching. Emily stood frozen, clutching the divorce papers to her chest like a shield, as if she could still salvage something if she just held on tight enough. Mark backed toward the side exit, but one of the men moved to block it casually, arms crossed. No shouting, no threats, just presence. Heavy, final. Mark bolted. He shoved past a folding chair, knocking it over with a screech that split the stunned silence. Someone gasped. Someone else swore under their breath. Mothers pulled children aside. Fathers stepped protectively closer to their wives. He sprinted through the side door into the parking lot, disappearing into the night, chased by nothing but the consequences he thought he'd escaped. The room didn't return to normal. It couldn't. The music stayed off. The laughter didn't come back. No one touched the buffet table again. Emily stood there, still wearing the red dress she had bought for him, her hands trembling at her sides. She turned toward me then, as if expecting something. A look. A word. A hand to help her back up. She got none of it. I crossed the room slowly, the divorce packet still in her hands. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but I stopped a few feet from her and spoke first. "It's done," I said, voice flat. "You can pack your things tomorrow. Or not. I don't care. The house isn't yours." She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening, not with tears but with pure rage. She wasn't sorry. She was humiliated. It wasn't about what she lost. It was about being seen losing. "You think this makes you better than me?" She snapped under her breath. "No," I said. "It just makes me free." I turned away from her. Sarah was standing stiffly by the entrance, clearly unsure what to do, clearly wishing she could rewind the night. Around her, groups of people whispered and stared. I didn't linger. At the door, one of the men who had confronted Mark caught my eye. He nodded once, not in thanks, not in solidarity. Just a simple recognition. A man acknowledging another man who did what had to be done. I nodded back and pushed open the door. The cold night air hit me hard, sharp and clean after the stifling rot of that room. I didn't look back. Emily's voice called after me once, sharp and broken. I kept walking. The parking lot was half empty now. Some cars were still there, abandoned by owners who had fled early. Mark's car was gone, probably left spinning gravel behind him. I reached my truck, climbed in, started the engine. For a moment, I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, headlights cutting two pale scars through the darkness. I thought about the house I'd be returning to alone. I thought about the dog waiting by the door, tail thumping quietly, asking no questions. And I thought about the last thing I needed to say, not to her, not to anyone else, but to myself. I pulled out my phone, typed a single message, and sent it to the event group chat the studio had set up for the evening. "The mask has fallen. No more cameras needed." Then I drove away, leaving the broken pieces behind for someone else to clean up. "You set this up," she said. "You planned all of this." I didn't deny it. There was no point. "I just made sure the right people got an invitation," I said. Then I walked past her, slow and steady, while Mark stumbled backward, still trying to talk his way out, still trying to find an exit. I didn't look back. The mask was off. The world was watching. And the collapse had only just begun.